Welcome, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar. My name is Shelley Carey, and I will be today's moderator. I would like to mention a few things before we get started. Today's webinar is being recorded. A link to the recording will be sent later today. You can find a copy of today's presentation in the handout section of your control panel. Simply click on the file to download it. You will have the opportunity to submit questions to today's presenters by typing your questions into the questions pane of the control panel. You may send in your questions at any time during the presentation. We will address them during the Q&A session at the end of the presentation. I will now turn the floor over to Jane Lutz.
Great, thank you, Shelley. Good morning or good afternoon to all of you. My name is Jane Lutz, and I serve as the Executive Director here at the Pharmacy Benefit Management Institute, or PBMI. Welcome to all of you, and thank you so much for joining us again today. We're happy to be with you as we have back-to-back webinars this week as a part of our ongoing webinar series and bringing relevant industry information to all of you. Today, our webinar series focuses specifically on new regulations that could potentially impact some of you in our industry. To help reduce the risk of fraud, waste, and abuse, the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, or CMS, has established requirements for Medicaid programs to validate their networks. Part D sponsors and managed Medicaid PBMs may bear the brunt of this risk assessment. So in our webinar today, we're very excited to have with us leaders from LexisNexis Risk Solutions. They're going to share with you some information that will hopefully allow you to understand the scope of the 455 regulations as it relates to PBMs, explore the kinds of data available to screen and validate providers, evaluate data solutions to comply with these new regulations, and network validation. So let me introduce to you briefly our speakers for today. Again, these are leaders brought to you from LexisNexis Risk Solutions. Our first presenter is Bobby Riley. Bobby is a seasoned retail pharmacy executive with over 20 years of experience working in the pharmacy industry. She's held roles in key functional areas in the pharmacy market, including pharmacy compliance, government affairs, operations, and talent management and recruiting. At LexisNexis Risk Solutions, Ms. Riley is responsible for developing strategy and product innovations that leverage LexisNexis Healthcare's core data assets to serve the needs of the pharmacy and pharmacy benefit manager markets. Our second presenter is Brian Idex. Brian Idex is an accomplished leader with 20 years of experience in product management, sales, and software development. In his role, he helps retail pharmacy and pharmacy benefit managed organizations address compliance, patient engagement, fraud risk, and data management needs through data intelligence and analytics solutions. So at this time, I would like to introduce and welcome to our webinar the LexisNexis Risk Solutions team, and I will turn the floor over to Bobby.
Thank you, Jane. Brian and I are thrilled to be here and share with the group today. We do appreciate everyone's time and hope that you'll find it informative. In this webinar, as Jane's pointed out, we will explore CMS's CFR 455 regulation, the impact and growing responsibilities of PBMs, and how data analytics and advanced technology can help you know your providers in your network and hopefully stay ahead of and prevent fraud. To set the stage for those of you who don't know Brian or me or may not be familiar with LexisNexis Risk Solutions, to give you an idea of where we're coming from, I wanted to give you just a little bit of background on our company. As you can see from this slide, we've got a lot of data. We collect data from over 13,000 consumer and public record sources on individuals and professional entities. We have over 65 billion public records on 270 million people. That's over 6 petabytes of data, which from all I know as a pharmacist about petabytes, that's a lot. Having a lot of data is one thing, but what do we do with it, especially in healthcare? We make connections. Apply technology to deliver actionable insights that will positively impact healthcare organizations to improve outcomes and/or mitigate risk. We leverage four main components: our vast data resources, big data technology, our linking and analytics, and our industry-specific expertise. With our unique algorithmic linking, some of you may have heard of our Lex ID, a unique patient identifier. We aggregate and link numerous sources of information to create a holistic view of an individual, including all that public records data. We apply proprietary analytics to deliver intelligence that can be acted on and provide services that leverage our healthcare data expertise to maximize value and help make organizations more secure and efficient. A bit more specifically, and what many of you may be more familiar with in the pharmacy and PBM space, is our provider data. This slide gives you an idea of our data sourcing strategy, how we stay ahead of the ever-changing provider data, which is just a slice of the data sources that LexisNexis manages. So enough about us, let's talk about you and why we're here. We're all here today because unfortunately fraud, waste, and abuse is real. It affects all of us in some way, personally with increasing healthcare costs, and professionally by affecting the bottom line and possibly patient safety. Billions of dollars are lost each year through various channels. Medicare paid 10% of the total in improper payments in 2014. Fraud is outpacing growth of recoveries. As PBMs process billions of prescriptions every year, each transaction is an opportunity for fraud, waste, or abuse. If you read all the fine print on the screen, all the scary stats, fraud is real, and there is a reason we need regulations to some extent. As the healthcare landscape continues to evolve, there are numerous challenges for PBMs, whether it be around increasing Medicaid enrollment and the move to managed Medicaid, the provider screening requirements within the Affordable Care Act, or just managing the various validations and exclusions, which we all know is time-consuming and labor-intensive. You have to stay out in front of all of this to reduce your own risk and protect patient safety. Another big challenge that we at LexisNexis truly understand is just how difficult it is to manage your provider data. As this chart illustrates, it changes at a crazy rate. 2.5% of provider demographics change monthly. 5% of doctors change status, and 30% change affiliations annually. If left untouched, in just 18 months, your provider data is only half as good as it once was. Bad provider data isn't usually intentional fraud, just another thing to worry about, and as this slide illustrates, can cost billions of dollars, both directly and indirectly. Looking more closely at a PBM's network, we ran some stats on pharmacists specifically and found that 2.6% had board sanctions and bankruptcy records, and 1.2% had criminal records. So how well do you know your network? What type of things keep you up at night? What tools should you be looking for to make all this easier? Brian's going to dig into all of this a bit further, but first we have some audience polling questions to help us understand who's with us today. Question number 1, estimate the number of pharmacies in your network.
Alrighty, we've got about 1/3 of people have voted. We'll give it about 10 more seconds before we close the vote. All right, a couple more seconds. All right, I'm going to go ahead and shut it down and we'll share results.
Thank you.
Bobby, can you see the results on the screen there?
I cannot.
Oh. Okay, let me so sorry about that.
All right.
Okay, so we have 25% saying 0 to 20,000, 18% 20 to 40,000, 15% 40 to 60,000, and 42% that say 60 to 80,000.
Very good. All right. We've got a nice range. Thank you, Shelley.
You're
Question
welcome.
2. Hope everyone can see question 2 now. Do you process Medicaid prescriptions currently? Yes or no?
All right. The votes are coming in much quicker on this one.
It's an easy one.
Right. Okay, we'll give it about 5 more seconds for people to get their vote in. All righty. I'm going to shut down. And we have 70% answering yes.
Very good. Very applicable then. We'll move on to question 3. Estimate the percentage for that 70% that did have Medicaid. Estimate the percentage of Medicaid within your network. And the 30%, your answer might be A if you want to play along.
All right. We have about 50% of the votes in. Give it a little bit longer, so get your votes in if you want to vote. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and shut down. All right, so we have 18% saying 0, 45% saying 1 to 25%, and then 25% saying 26 to 50%, and then 7% and 5% respectively for the other categories.
Very good. Thank you, Shelley. And thank you, group, for participating.
You're welcome.
All right, Brian, it's over to you.
Great. Thank you, Bobby. Yeah, and thanks, everybody, for answering those questions. That helps us a lot. So now I'm going to talk about the regulation known as CFR 455. The Code of Federal Regulations, CFR Title 42, Part 455, Subpart E, has established requirements for pharmacy benefit managers, PBMs, that handle Medicaid prescription claims to validate their networks, all to help minimize the amount of fraud, waste, and abuse in the handling of pharmacy prescriptions. The regulations require validation of any provider submitting Medicaid claims and includes pharmacists. Some of the checks that CMS requires as part of this regulation is the provider practicing with a license that has expired? Has the provider been convicted of a felony? Does the provider have previous fraudulent activity that caused disbarment from other programs or networks? Each of these types of checks are required and must be performed initially on providers and on an ongoing basis to ensure that any provider would pass these checks over time. Also, CFR requires that the PBM ensure that the provider is enrolled in Medicaid and that this validation occur every 5 years. The Medicaid enrollment files are made available to the state agencies and PBMs, but to our knowledge, these files have not yet been made available to third parties or retail pharmacy for integration into existing systems that could help reduce non-enrolled providers from being included in prescription claim submissions. CFR 455.436, which defines the federal database checks, requires the following checks be performed for providers. So first, you need to confirm the identity and determine the exclusion status of providers and any person with an ownership or control interest or who is an agent or managing employee of the provider through routine checks of federal databases. Secondly, you need to check the Social Security Administration's Death Master file, the NPES database, or National Plan and Provider Enumeration System, the list of excluded individuals and entities, LEIE, the Excluded Parties List System, EPLS, and any such other databases as the Secretary may prescribe. Finally, you need to consult appropriate databases to confirm identity upon enrollment and re-enrollment, and check the LEIE and EPLS databases no less frequently than monthly. So far, I've highlighted some important parts of the regulation to bring them to your attention, but realize that the regulation contains 16 sections within it, and they're shown on the screen, and I'll just leave that for a second for you just to review that quickly. All right, so all of these requirements indicate, knowing your provider network is the key to preventing fraud, waste, and abuse, and ensuring that providers that should not be in your network are not. But knowing each of these providers is a challenging task and must be supported by automated processes. You'll need to use multiple data sources, analytics, and reliable technology to implement a workable compliance program into your daily activities. The more these processes are automated, the more likely you're going to use them in a consistent way. You will also need tools to gain insight into schemes that may otherwise appear legitimate.
Okay, Brian, I think we're going to insert a couple more polling questions here. Hopefully those came up okay. So question 4, do you use automated systems or manual processes to screen your network currently?
All right, and voting is taking place. We'll wait about 10 more seconds, to get your vote in. All right, I'm going to go ahead and shut down. We have about 40% who voted, so there might be a lot of people who aren't sure. And let me share the results. We have 69% who said automated systems.
Very good. All right, moving on to question 5. Is your current network screening done internally or do you use external services?
All right. About a quarter of people have voted. Again, we'll give you about 10 more seconds to get your vote in. Okay, this one had about the same number of voting. So let me share those results. 74% said internally.
All right, very good. And moving on to I think it's our final question. How well would you rate your current network screening process?
Okay.
And these are anonymous.
All right. 10 more seconds again to get your votes in before we shut it down. All right. Let's share those results. We have 17% saying excellent, 50% saying good, 20% said fair, and the remaining 13% said not good.
All right. Thank you again, everyone, for participating. Brian?
Great, thank you. So let's get into some of the details about how to know who your providers are so that you can prevent fraud schemes. To get a comprehensive view of your providers, you really should understand risks with their professional profile, their personal profile, and your data's reliability. A provider's professional profile has many aspects, including licensure and exclusion lists. Consider that you need to validate your providers against not just the DEA and CMS lists, but also against the state boards. The LEIE is a list published by the OIG, which provides information about individuals and entities who are excluded from Medicaid. The SAM database tells suspensions and exclusions from the GSA, Government Services Administration. This also is called the EPLS, or Excluded Parties List System. INPES is the system that publishes the NPI information from CMS. So you can see the multiple federal lists that need to be checked to perform a comprehensive professional evaluation. You also should gain access to a provider's personal profile. Such data as whether they're deceased, have criminal convictions, felony convictions, bankruptcies, liens, and a valid tax ID number are important. Gaining a comprehensive understanding of a provider's personal profile also means knowing any suspicious business relationships they may have. Are they part of a business that's owned by a felon? Does their business share an address with other unrelated businesses? Do they use aliases that lead to connection to suspicious entities? So all of these data points provide a more complete picture of the providers in your network. Also, knowing that the data you have is reliable is very important. Are you getting data from the primary source? Can you be confident in the data you're seeing? Licensure, disciplinary data, address, phone, or affiliations data? Is that data being used broadly in other industries so that you know it's being validated and updated as often as possible? Ensuring you have accurate data from your sources is going to give you confidence that you're mitigating your risks. It's the combination of a provider's professional and personal profile, along with having confidence in your current and historical data, that gives you the most comprehensive view of your providers. And finally, you need to have access to these files and sources on a regular basis to monitor any changes to the data, which will indicate new potential problems with the providers in your network. So not only initially will you need to screen your providers, but also monitor for ongoing issues that take place after the initial screening. So now that we understand the multiple aspects of the 455 requirements, it's worth discussing briefly what PBMs can use to evaluate if a third-party vendor is able to help meet the 455 requirements. First, the company should have access to all of the data sources I previously discussed, including access to the relationships among entities and individuals. They should also have a technology platform that can support these large quantities of data in a highly reliable infrastructure. The system should strive for the highest accuracy when linking data sources together to an individual entity. The company should have expertise in the pharmacy and PBM space to be able to provide a usable solution targeted towards your needs. And finally, they should provide a solution that caters to your specific challenges. And equally important as the company delivering solution is the solution itself. So I'll spend a little time describing how the Lexis solution meets the 455 requirements, so you can use these highlights to ensure that you incorporate a solution that has similar capabilities. You'll see on the screen the list of validations that need to be performed to meet the 455 regulations for each of the types of individuals and entities. The LexisNexis solution not only meets the 455 requirements, but builds on those requirements to ensure that you have the most comprehensive view of your provider network possible. Such items as criminal activity and specialty certification, and whether they have a valid tax ID number, can provide alerts to your compliance team that something is suspicious about those providers. While you may not be at immediate risk for 455, you may be exposing yourself to future 455 issues and other bad behavior you'd just rather not have as part of your business. Provider Integrity Scan enables PBMs to verify and monitor ongoing the provider's licensing and credentials and to understand potentially fraudulent and criminal behavior. Integrating a solution will help reduce PBM costs by keeping such providers out of your network and finding those that have recently begun engaging in undesired or suspicious behavior. Ultimately, the PBM's goals are to keep down costs, improve compliance to regulations, and ensure patients have access to the best providers to stay healthy. It's important to make sure that the solution you implement can not only provide an upfront pre-enrollment screening, but can also perform ongoing monitoring of your providers. While it's very important to ensure that undesired providers are not allowed into the network initially, it's at least as important to ensure that any existing providers have not lost licensure, been added to exclusion lists, become deceased, or have had disciplinary action taken against them since they were allowed in your network initially. As far as delivery options, you want to ensure that you incorporate a solution that meets your specific operational needs. While some PBMs prefer to have batch files transferred to deliver and receive data, others may prefer a more real-time integrated approach. Both mechanisms should support a secure data transmission. Typically, batch solutions will require the PBM to read the report or integrate the data into their systems for analysis, while the real-time solutions may have the results more integrated into an existing UI for easy review of the provider's results. Other solutions may offer an online portal for you to view one provider at a time. The important thing to highlight here is that you want to make sure that you choose a solution that best matches your existing IT and business requirements and find a vendor who can work within those requirements. This is an important aspect of your compliance requirements and operational workflow, so you want to make sure you find a vendor who can help integrate within your business and not expect you to conform to their solutions. So in summary, we've covered three main areas. First, the growing responsibility of PBMs regarding provider screening. Second, what CFR 455 is and how it impacts PBMs. And third, how you can better understand who your providers are, meet compliance regulations, and prevent fraud. And we also covered the importance of selecting the right vendor to help you manage these important regulatory requirements. So now I believe we will open it up to take any questions.
Great. Thank you so much to both of you for your presentation. And just as a reminder for any of you, if you have questions, to please go to the questions section of the control panel on the right-hand side of your screen. And you can just type your questions in there and we will answer them. So let me pull up, looks like we have a few questions that are coming in. The first one, so does your solution provide primary source verification?
Yes, actually LexisNexis is URAC accredited, and our master file combines data from various primary sources. So it should be considered as a primary source verification, yes. Thank you.
Excellent. Okay, second question. How many records can I submit at one time?
Yeah, so our batch processes, we can handle over 100,000 records at a time.
Excellent. And a third question, how quickly do I get my results?
Usually within 48 to 72 hours of when we first receive them.
Another question here, this is about the Lex ID. How do you assign and use across sources the Lex ID?
How do we use the cross sources?
Across all sources.
Yeah, so we gather so we have thousands of sources where we receive data, and we use the various information from those data sources to create a unique Lex ID. And we have proprietary linking technology that uses fuzzy logic and complex algorithms to determine whether those records match to a unique individual. We've used that technology in several industries, financial, government, and insurance industries for a couple of decades, and have fine-tuned that process. And we've been using the same technology in healthcare for the past 5 to 10 years.
And another question on the Lex ID, is the Lex ID ever used at the patient level?
Yeah, absolutely. So as I was just mentioning in the previous question, each individual in the U.S. has a Lex ID, and it's been assigned, and insurance companies, financial institutions, for mortgages, government agencies have been using that Lex ID for many years. And so each individual has a Lex ID, and we absolutely have used it in the healthcare industry to assign a unique patient ID for patients.
Links all of the various public records information on all of us together and assigns an ID. So it can be used throughout industries.
Okay, super. Another question. How often is the primary source information updated?
Well, that depends. So there's thousands of sources out there. So it depends on how frequently those databases are updated by the primary source. So so an easy one like the DEA, they update their data daily. So we receive that data and update our databases within a few hours. There's just so many sources to go through to explain. Some of the state boards, they update their data a little bit less frequently than daily. And so we have great relationships with these primary source entities to ensure we get the data as timely as possible, and frequently try to influence getting it even faster.
The slide that I had showed as an example with our provider data sourcing, and how we do that with we do web scrapes and harvests and things like that. So there's various ways we go about getting the data as well. So to Brian's point, when it's made available, some is sent to us, some we go out and get, and some we search for. So it varies greatly.
Excellent. Okay, here's a question. Are you able to obtain the pharmacy data directly from the pharmacies for screening?
We do contain pharmacies within our database and their information, but for the screening, we would be screening your specific network. So we would obtain that list that you need screened specifically from the customer or client.
Okay. Another question, what is the information provided by us? What if it's incorrect? How does your solution handle this?
Shelley, will you repeat that one more time for me?
Sure. What if the information provided by us is incorrect? How does your solution handle this?
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Thank you.
That's okay.
So our solution can append correct information back so that you'll receive what you sent to us, and then we can also append and correct that.
A couple more questions here. How often do the checks need to be performed?
Yes, so very good. The CFR requires the PBMs ensure the providers enrolled in Medicaid every 5 years, so that's the Medicaid enrollment. And then the EPLS and LEIE need to be checked no less frequently than monthly, is the way it's worded. No less frequently than monthly.
Okay.
Our current clients, I believe, our solution, you can choose the frequency. I think monthly is what we normally see on checking the entire network.
Okay, here's a question around your PBM partners. Do your PBM partners participate in the development of your solutions?
In the development, so the solution has been developed. Now it's configurable and how we feed the information to you to fit within your, your mechanisms of receiving data. If you want to tap into it in real time, or you want to receive batch files, or send us batch files, or query it through API. That kind of stuff is flexible. But the solution itself is developed. So we're not really looking for development partners, if that's the question, but we're certainly configurable and flexible in the solution that we implement.
Yeah, and as rules and regulations, those on the phone that are our client side, we get a lot of feedback, and that is how we continue to improve our solutions as we move forward and as the industry evolves. So they're very involved in a current solution and how it may change as time moves forward.
Mm-hmm. So another question, if a provider is licensed in several states, how do you prioritize that information from states to state to determine status to service the Medicaid population?
Wow, so that's a detailed question.
I'm not sure I'm able to respond to that appropriately, Brian.
So that person who's asking is laughing at my answer. So I'm not sure I have a direct answer to that, and I would not want to direct the audience in the wrong path. So let us take that. I mean, we can take that back, and if that person wants to reach out to us directly, we can certainly get that question answered and get them clear on the prioritization of our rules and things like that.
Yeah, Rochelle, if you have that person's contact information, we're happy to follow up.
Absolutely, absolutely. So just as a reminder, if anybody else has questions, please don't hesitate to type them into the questions section on the control panel on the right-hand side of your screen. We'll give it just another minute or two to see if there's a few questions that are coming in. Okay, I think that brings us to the end of the questions. So thank you very much to our speakers. And Shelley, I will turn it back over to you for some closing comments.
All right, great. I also want to thank Bobby and Brian for speaking today and for everyone who took time out of their day to attend. When you leave today's webinar, you will receive a survey on the presentation, and we would appreciate it if you would complete that and provide your feedback. On behalf of PBMI and our presenters, thank you for joining us and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.